All right. So, took me a while to set this one up. I don't know what was happening, but back at it again. Going to be streaming for probably another 2 hours. I'm going to try for 2 hours. Putting together what I had thought of and making it a little bit more digestible and understandable. And I guess I should start with again, my name is Pyronite or Jared, doesn't matter. But I go by Pyronite Press when I'm using my publishing name, and we're just going to start going over some of the things that I went over last stream, and then we'll continue on from there. And again, this is just my process, my approach to writing Dungeons and Dragons or writing tabletop adventures that I then turn around and sell. So, first, our premise. The setup is for the Charu Primer, which is going to be another thing that I'm going to release. It's my own setting, kind of like Eberron or whatever. Yeah. And the plan is to release this adventure either shortly before or shortly after I release my setting. Going to be made for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, but this approach can be used for any system. It's not really a mechanical thing. We'll talk about details, but also include uh, in the stream and chatting how I might change it for different systems. Um, or how to break down mechanics into their easiest functions so you can then apply it to different systems. And as I mentioned, going to release it for Drive-Thru RPG. Now, the concept for this adventure, it's going to be part of Session Zero, as you can see here. Part of Session Zero, maybe before or after players have made their characters. Um, for this concept, I do need some different demon types, which will be creatures that I make on stream when I need them. I don't need them right now, but I've got some basic ideas for them. But for the story, during the Material War, when the demons and devils from the realm of fiends could cross the veil into the mundane realm. In that time, the fiends called to those who were shunned from society and otherwise in exile and left with feelings of belonging and doubt. They were influenced to perform rituals in key locations around the continent in order to weaken the veil and allow the fiends to enter the mundane realm and take it for themselves. Over time, these followers started to call themselves the Obsidian Chain, which is just a cultist group, and wear heavy chain-like jewelry made of obsidian, whether it was huge mantle-like bracers or anything like that. Now, this is going to be taking during that Material War. This war takes place 500 years before my setting takes place. It's kind of like the setting's history. Um, it's going to start on the war fronts. They're going to be when they're making their last stand. This iconic hero called a legendary druid performs a ritual to close the veil. Nearing the climax of the final fight in the Valley of Blades, which is just a part of my setting, location. I talked about all this stuff in the first stream, just kind of quickly going over it. The legendary druid separates himself from the front lines and he's never seen again, which leads into part of his mystery. Legendary druid performed the ritual underground with only his most trusted advisors. Is basically the legendary druid is his own version of, or my own version of, a player group. There's the main character or the main leader of the characters, and his couple allies. The allies were another druid, who's the spouse of the legendary druid, and then there was a mentor, who's some kind of priest, whether that's in Dungeons and Dragons, that would be a cleric or maybe a paladin. We don't know. We'll decide that later. Now, in the final battle for the Material War is fought in the Valley of Blades. Major players from the Fiendish Realm and the Celestial Realm are believed to be seen here fighting. So in my mind, in my concept, I've always envisioned the pantheons coming together and starting to fight for the realm of man, or the mundane realm, defending it from the fiends. Well, you would need key players or key heroes from either side, and we'll get into some of those later on. New ancestries for the players, which comes into the Valley of Blades, which is kind of the birth, this history, this war. The outcome of it is the birth of this new ancestry of people or heritage of people called the Grim Willows. They're an ancestry of people born of magic and death. They're not undead and they're not dead either. Or they're not alive either, I should say, I guess. Makes sense? Caught between life and death in what they called the in-between, the forever compelled towards the void. The void is what drives these people to do the things that they do. There's kind of this essence of nothingness that happens with them. But that's what's the outcome of this adventure. So I just wanted to touch on it quickly. Now, the reveal of the big adventure. This is kind of what we're getting into more of the adventure and not necessarily the lore. At the end of this adventure, you would be turning to one or more of the players and explaining that their character has started adventuring to find the meaning behind ominous dreams they have been having recently. So, in this adventure, this one-shot adventure that I'm making as part of session 0, there would be the players take the roles of different people in this war, in this fighting, whether that's side of the fiends or side of the heroes, doesn't matter. What matters is that consciousness that they have during this moment is constantly shifting between uh, person to person or different entities or creatures from creature to creature who fought in this war. Then at the end, as the reveal says, you shift it back to the players and you say, everything that you just had, this whole adventure, you wake up and it's part of your dream. It's a real, it feels real, too real to be fake dream. It's not your stereotypical players go out, they start fighting, and then they all wake up and it was a dream and everybody's back. Even if that character died, they're now back because it was only a dream. It's a little bit of a twist on that, and I thought that might be a fun thing to play with. So for the setting, there's a couple locations that we're going to go over probably today, flesh out a little bit, not just flesh out, but drop in. Now, the anchors or the 5-room design, which is how I base most of my adventures. There's 5 anchors instead of rooms, because there isn't going to be really rooms in this, but number 1, starts in the thick of battle during the climax of the Material War's final battle. Players jump from perspective to perspective of iconic figures fighting in the battle. Like I mentioned, they're just going through these people and seeing it from their eyes. Now, at some point, the curator, who's one of my pantheon people, one of the deities, he's going to attack with a blinding light which causes a scar in Charo, known today as the Valley of Blades, which is our setting. That is going to be some kind of down moment where everything's eerily calm, and the players have a moment to adjust to things happening. The perspectives of those players are going to get pulled underground into the chamber with the legendary druid. Next part. The ritual is being performed by the legendary druid and is interrupted by a fiend's influence. If you remember from the last stream, I talked about how I connected how these two things work. Don't want to waste too much time going over things from last stream. But basically, the legendary druid has opened himself to corruption. Fiends take advantage of that. Legendary druid succumbs to the influence of the fiend and is unable to finish the ritual. So their spouse is forced to finish the ritual because they are also a druid. Because of the fiend's influence, legendary druid attacks their advisors. So they attack these two other people. So that's kind of our big fight. The real final battle is held underground amongst loved ones. Combat is with skill checks to maintain the ritual. So maybe the legendary druid on one of the turns, one round, releases a spell, attacks the druid, their spouse, and that spouse now needs to make some kind of save to maintain the ritual. That's going to be part of it. Maintaining the ritual for X amount of rounds to complete causes the banishment of fiends and celestials. Basically, you have to hold the ritual, perform the ritual for this many turns, and you win. When that happens, or sorry, part of this fight, the perspectives are pulled into these fighters. So there's two advisors. There's the priest and the druid spouse, and the legendary druid. Maybe there's a couple extra people depending on how big your party is, so that each of your players can get into this fight. Maybe the demon in his corruption, or sorry, the druid in their corruption is able to summon some demons leftover players to jump into. But the perspectives change every round. So you go through one round of combat of one of your PCs being the bad guy. And then next round, it's a different PC. Next round, different PC. That way you're kind of shifting it away from the PvP style encounter, which some people do frown upon. Saying instead of me fighting you, it still becomes this our party dealing with the situation. And that's kind of my way around it here. So after the encounter, the fallout is the ritual is completed, creating the legendary oak, which is a big tree that people remember as a part of this war. They don't remember the legendary druid, they remember the tree. Perspectives float in this area to witness the final moments of the material war. Players wake up from the dream. Oh, excuse me. Players wake up from their dream. And again, you point to those, say, everything that just happened was in your dream. It's haunting you. Now you've decided to set your a lot of echo on my mic. I will see about that. Thank you for letting me know, Rizroy. Give me 2 seconds. See if I can change some of this. I'll be right back so you don't see everything. Alright, so I'm not too sure what's causing the echo. Could be just I'm speaking louder than I was yesterday, so I'll try to control that, I guess. But this is. So where were we? It is really bad, let me know, and I can try to adjust it, but still learning. Still learning all the OBS and stuff like that. Alright. But the fallout of the adventure is that the perspectives float in the area. The final moments of material war. Players wake up. Now you start session one. Or now they have their motivation to go into session one. Alright. So, next page. There we go. Now I'm going to start doing some header stuff. So when I start writing my adventures, I do it from front to back. I don't really jump around that much until I have enough established in the area that I'm working on in the writing. So first, in my still slate audio, just okay. I will look into that later. But there are four things that I kind of look into. First one is the synopsis, which all this information we have already. Now we're just fleshing it out into an actual module. So first one is the synopsis. Second one is background. Third one is the adventure hook. And last one is for the DM. Now each of these sections is just kind of the advertising for why somebody might pick up the adventure, just the quick information that they have. So part of the background, I already know I'm going to have a section for brief history. Brief history about the land, so we know what to provide or where to put this encounter, where it's happening from, what is around the land that we have. Okay, so synopsis. So now, go back up to our concept. So this is directly to the people who would be buying. And where is it? I'm going to pull up an example of my other one here. Alright. So I got that up. Now the one thing I did forget is this whole section, this whole part here, this we will make 2, this one we will make 1, or sorry, 3. This whole section is going to be known as the briefing. I always start my adventures with the briefing. What is this? Where is it? Why is it? How is it? All those questions. And then I break into the synopsis, background, adventure hook, and then for the DM. For the DM, it's kind of the easy stuff, so I can do this quickly. For the DM, these are things, your quick point form notes for what the DM is going to get. So they're going to get an X page adventure that fits anywhere in your world. And then I can come back and I will fix this when I know what X is. Next thing that they will be able to get from this adventure is locations ready to use in your own world, in your own settings. So I always make if you remember in the first stream, I talked about cementing the concepts in my own head of my own setting, Charlie. But that doesn't mean somebody couldn't take the City of Honor or the City of Ironcrest or the Valley of Blades, the three kind of nearing parts of the setting here. Doesn't mean they couldn't take that and drop it into their own settings. Maybe they've got a big adventure where, for example, Storm King's Thunder from 5th edition. If you're not using the exact setting, maybe there's a small village that you need. Well, Ironcrest could be that small city that is between travel. It's always things that you can be dragging and dropping it from one thing into another. That's where we get our homebrew from. So you can use these locations anywhere. And that location would be Valley Blades. Let's see. What else can I include? So I know that I'm going to be including the demon creatures that, again, last time I talked about. I don't want to be using some just generic lemurs or lemures, however you want to pronounce it, or spine devils or imps. I want to make my own creatures. We talked about it at the top. Those creatures are going to have stat blocks that you can give to your players. That's what they can do on their turn. So there's going to be extra creatures that these DMs are going to get if they get this module. So say X creatures, let's say X new creatures for both fiend and celestial types. Let's say news. Again, wording, I'm always changing wording. New fiend and celestial type creatures with stat blocks. At the end of all of my adventures, I always create brief NPC and monster cards, or little things that you can print off for yourself as just a quick reference. Needed information and basic descriptions. As well as suggestions for altering the adventure to better suit party dynamics. So this one is a little bit different. So most of my or all of my adventures, I always include a section at the end for tweaking the adventure or helping the DM tweak the adventure for their party. If they have a strong tank party, then they'd be able to tweak it to be more dangerous and give it more of a threat. Or if their party has nothing but wizards, they can tweak it to be a little less dangerous so that you don't just kill everything. In this, it's a little bit different because it's part of a session 0. So it's not really killing their characters, but I'm still going to include some suggestions to altering the adventure to suit different settings or different outcomes, we'll say. Because if you remember last time I talked about, I didn't like how I kept saying the ritual was complete, creating the oak. So maybe one of these results is the ritual is not completed. What happens? And I can go into some detail about how that would change the world based on what happened. So these are going to be some quick things the DM will get um, when they purchase the thing. That's kind of their first thing they will look at to see what am I getting aside from the adventure. So now, part of the hooks. The hook is why the players would be interested in playing this adventure. How does the DM purchases the module? How does the DM then convince the players it would be interesting for them? Well, part of this adventure hook is learning the lore of the setting. So before part of my setting is this, like I said, this is part of the lore. Well, it's so far back in my settings history that people are forgetting about it. They don't remember the legendary druid, they don't remember the war. It's just something that happened so long ago that they forgot. Which is why the players are interested in learning about it. So before jumping into the campaign's perceptions, here the players witness the history of the setting that people have forgotten. Um, you know what? I am going to change this. This is going to go into synopsis. Yes. So the thing that I always forget is synopsis. I'll write it here. Spoken out of character. The adventure hook should be spoken in character. And this helps distinguish between, or it helps cement some of the hook, give it more character interest, and then synopsis would be the player interest or DM interest. So the adventure hooks. I'm probably going to stop boldening words like this as often as I was last stream, just because I want to start writing through it. And I know what it is because I can always refer to it up at the top. But things like mundane realm, that's a term that I want to cement for my settings. So that's why I'm still giving it bold to stand out. All right. Mundane realm. Let's see. it is a little different because it's not just the players are doing this. This person should be able to do that because they're not the players. They are part of the history. So the wording on this is going to be a little bit different. So I'm just trying to think my way through that. And if I'm going too fast, or if you have questions, by all means, drop it in chat. I will more than happy to explain something I've written or go into detail about why I'm writing it that way. If you're watching this as the vlog, by all means, leave a comment at the bottom and I can get back to that. There. This is going to spill into a little bit of both. So down here, just to make it easier, I always do this as well. A historian. So this is now referring to the party. A historian character would be overjoyed to learn pieces of a forgotten time. So maybe this character that you turn to say these are your memories, if that player is building a historian character, they would be now motivated because this is a piece of forgotten history that they can learn, and they would be the one to put their name on it, etc., etc. And similarly, not just with a historian, but a worshiper. And this could be, again, could be a cleric. I don't know, I'm doing it. There we go. Shopper. Yep, Shiva. Again, this could be a cleric. It could be a warlock. It could be any non-magical class or non-connected class to the deities. Just somebody who is interested in having a character interested in the pantheon. Part of the pantheons is this fight. Yeah, worshiper character. It's gonna tell me it's wrong. That's fine. Deal with it later. Worshiper character. Then I will get a couple basic ones in here. Something about, or more unique ones, I should say. Any character. Possibly making connections. Crimson was something else, another faction that's not related to this. I always get them confused. They are the library society, basically, in my setting. Learning how the obsidian chain. Drew back the veil between worlds. So as you can see, this one is a little bit more different. Yes, it could still be a worshiper, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. It could be somebody who's just interested in making a deal, right? They've got this one might fall into the necromancers or the desperate characters who are trying to bring a loved one back or make a deal to save somebody or whatever. Characters are interesting, they're always going to surprise you. This could feed into that surprise. To deal with the devil. Alright, and let's do one more. I always try to give a well-rounded version of it. Possible aspects. There we go. So, a character who how can I say this? Drawn to military tactics or combat, or large-scale combat. So this one might lead into some interesting avenues with how do the demons fight? What were their methodologies behind large-scale fights? Who it is drawn, yeah. Alright, so now I need a blurb. So when it comes to writing these adventures, you don't just want to leave something like this. The only one that's kind of an exception is the For the DM section. Because the For the DM section, to me, is just a list of things that are going to quickly draw the attention of the DM into reading your adventure. Everything else, if you are writing, should have a header. It should have, if it's going to have bullet points, it has them at the bottom. And in the middle, between those things, is your blurb. Some kind of detail about this information. So I'm going to separate this so I can see it, and then condense it later. Alright, so now this is the in-character speaking that I was mentioning. War spilled out of control. Fiends threatening to take over. I can change this. Make it more dramatic. There we go. Call the ceasefire to deal with the unified threat. Fiends, that's not going to be, are piercing the veil and entering, or they're not piercing, they have pierced, they are on the land. Mundane realm. So there's our big kind of catch. Both nations. So in my setting, there are two major nations. There are more, but there's two bigger nations that are always at war. And these are the ones who are putting aside their differences to fight with the unified threat. Both nations, natural and have drafted, we'll say, every able body to fight in this war over humanity. The fight is fight is coming to the boiling point. And every person matters. So it's set up because of this section, the way it's going to work. It's set up as if it's the normal adventure. Now, I'm going to include another part that's going to be the twist. In this, or no, that'd be part of the synopsis, rather. That's going to be up here. Right? Out of character. Before jumping into the campaign as part of Section 0, the players witness the history of the setting that the players are from. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this. Just looking at my other one as a reference. I always look at my previous adventures to kind of help me stay focused on the task and make it sound unified with the other ones that I've written. Now, it's not necessarily written out of character. I may have misspoken here. So it's not out of character, but the veil or the scope is pulled back a little bit. Yes, okay. This, I'm gonna get rid of here. So it's not a different voice. It's a different scope, and I'll explain that in a second. So this one is a larger scope. And this one is a smaller scope, or a direct scope. So here, because this concept is a larger concept, a larger scope, it's going to go up here. Now the smaller scope is the direct connection to the players. So for those playing the home game, I'm looking at my Visions of Vanity adventure that's published on DriveThruRPG, which you could get all of my adventures on DriveThruRPG for free currently until the 1st of April, where I'm going to bump them back up to $2 where they were. Doing a birthday special for myself, just getting the name out. So until the end of the month, they're free. So go grab them. Follow along to what I'm going to read here. The Adventure Hook from Visions of Vanity. The party has been hired to prove themselves, and as a last resort, to retrieve a gemstone rumored to be within the temple of the Empress. from the time most don't remember. The only thing people seem to turn up is that the Empress was extremely wealthy. So this is your direct hook. This is why your players are connected here. This, I might have to take some time to think about this and change how I do that. Because again, it's not directly connected to the players yet. It becomes their memory. Um, Actually, speaking of that, that could be how I am writing. Say some or all members. So that what I was going to write peels away from the scope a little bit and not from this adventure. So I want to stay towards this adventure, not session one. Connection between players and their characters, as well as the setting they will be playing in. Okay. And then, so you can see how these things still connect to what I was talking about up here. But that scope of what we are talking about is small, much smaller. This is how it directly connects to the player, not to the game or the adventure as a whole. That's your large scope, the bigger concept. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So now in the synopsis is also more bullet notes, but this is more of your timeline of the adventure. What is the play by play, the fast cliff notes of the adventure from start to finish. So now I'm going to take basically all of these stages here that I've done. Some of them I'm going to break into more detail, but again, bullet point. But some of them I'm going to I'm going to hold back on some of the detail because we don't need it at this moment. So I'm going to quickly read through this and then we'll start adding those. Again, it's starting from the beginning of the adventure to the end of the adventure. The most succinct kind of way possible. So let's see. Characters. Let's just say consciousness. I want to shy away from consciousness, but we'll use it. both sides of the battle. The raging battle, raging war, conflict, we'll say. Interrupted by so in my setting, all of my all of my deities rather, they go by some kind of title. There's the curator, the midnight maiden, the warhawk, and they're all left fairly ambiguous, especially because no one's seen them in a long time. So I've always kept it there. It's up to the DM how they want to play it. Maybe the title changes. Maybe the deity changes depending on who they're talking to. All that kind of fun stuff. They're gods. They can do what they want. I know I shouldn't be stopping every time, but I don't want to be staring at it. Right, so like I said, I want to be a little bit concise, but this is still vague. I want to get the bones in, then we can put the meat. Flesh out a little bit. Just thinking about where I can split this. Get that for now. So I'm starting to add a little bit more bulk to it. All right, see you, Arhan. Glad you can make out. I'm gonna go for about 1 more hour, so maybe we'll finish the briefing page and then call it a day. And it takes time to sit and stare and play it in your head before I write it down. It's always been part of my writing style, and I'll rewrite things and rewrite things. So if I go quiet, it's because I'm thinking about the wording, and then I'm going to rewrite it in about 5 minutes anyways. So it's part of the designing. I do think a major part of this one shot will be the fun that people can have when your consciousness is pulled into the body of an elf, and you turn to another one and say your consciousness is pulled into that of a demon. Have some quick fighting, whoever does a quick roll, and these would be, because it's a large war front, I would use the minion rules from 4th edition, where it's just one hit, one kill, nice and clean, continue fighting, make it feel bigger. Explained all that last stream. I just think it would just be fun to have whoever makes the highest dex roll, you make your attack first. If you hit, you kill them. And then that character's consciousness just jumps into another body and they continue. That all happens until the curator's attack devastates. Basically, a nuke goes off, triggering the next part of the module. Uh, called humanity. Uh, no, let's do it bold. You remember last time I mentioned the curator's crown? That's just the mountain range in my setting where this takes place. It's thought that the curator made the setting, Charlie, and the way that this mountain range looks, it looks like the points of a crown. So they call it the curator's crown. And 5 should be enough for this part here. I do think this is going to be a bigger section, but I want to move on for now. So background. This is what needs to be the very, very quick information about what is happening, the history of this place. The brief history is going to be a little bit more detailed, but background is generic. So because it's generic, it is going to be only bullet points, just some quick things, and the brief history will have more blurbs. So brief history, oh no, sorry, background. Um, So the Obsidian Chain been performing rituals to weaken the veil for a couple decades. They've been doing this, like, in my opinion, these fiends or these demons and devils have been slowly playing the strings and pulling on chords and manipulating, and the slow burn of it, and we're just throwing people into the middle of the uh, the outcome, like what's happening because of all this manipulation. What else? I'm going to do echelon and north, yeah. I'm actually going to do this. Empire. Give it their full title. Oh, there's my OBS reconnecting. Yeah, slowly. And you will see that some of this section doubles over. So you're not always writing new things. You can take some things that belong in multiple different places and put them in. There's no problem with that. If it makes it easier, do it. All right, brief history. So your background, again, using the same terms as scope, your background would be your bigger scope, your bigger history. Brief history is going to be your smaller scope, your more immediate things, or more relevant to a setting. So for here, one of them would be the curator's crown, range. Let's see. Another one we would need is echelon, kingdom, and Red Empire. And then quick blurb on each thing, 2, 3, 4 sentences of each thing. What are they? Why is it relevant? Who are they? Let's see. Splits apart the two shows here. Two major nations. So they're not the only ones, but they're the two major ones. I can word this. So these mountains, because of how large they are, and because they split the two nations, they create this wall between the nations. And every time that these two nations, like I said, if there were no fiends, they would be fighting at all times, or there'd be some kind of, I don't want to say fighting, but maybe tension. And maybe the tension gets more, which causes some kind of skirmish. But either way, this clash comes to the mountains, and because of the way that the mountains are, how big they are, it's difficult to fight on, difficult to fortify, which causes the infighting or the tension to just break, and they kind of go back. Makes it difficult for one nation to invade the other, and vice versa. So it's natural stalemate. So that's what I'm actually going to say. Mountains have created natural point of there we go. So just something very quick, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 sentences about each point, giving us some information about each of these details. And so this one, I have these written already in my other adventures, so I'm just going to quickly write some of those sentences here. So, I just want to type this out if it's in bold later. Who reside on half of because we're talking about the curator's crown first. I can just say by name there. I will fix all that in a second. Just copying it from one place to another. I'm not explaining what this is and what it means to my setting. Just a second. All right. So Hatima first. In my In my setting, it's not exactly one continent. It is two large islands that get referenced together as a continent, and then there's some scattering islands around it. So the main continent of Char, the bigger continent or the bigger island, is called Hatima. The smaller one is called Magripa, but you don't need to know that about Magripa because our setting doesn't go there yet. Um, Lord Takeda is the leader of the Loyth Empire. He is so Loyth Empire. You don't need to go into it now, but they are a form. They're inspired loosely by um, fantasy Asia or like the wuxia stuff, and all my anime inspiration that I've ever really had, kind of drawing it out, putting it together, and putting it as a nation in my setting. And the Echelon Kingdom is more of the fantasy Europe, the traditional Dungeons and Dragons setting that I have. Again, loosely based on it, drawing some inspirations and creating things originally for those parts. So I'm just going to open up my other adventure here, and so I can draw a paragraph about Echelon. No, I want ball tools, I think it is. Yes. Alright, so the Echelon Kingdom. And I'll fix the bolt. Okay, that's why it's worded that way. Read the full thing before doing it. As citizens. I wonder if it's worded different in my other setting. Or in my other adventure, rather. I'm not done one. Sorry, Liz. Give me 1 second. Right, Minstrels of Mystery. This is the one that goes through Echelon. So this is the one I'm pulling my blurb about Echelon from. so it is mostly the same. Just got this last. Okay. So I can just leave it here then. Sorry to waste all that time just to give up on it. Or not really give up, but decide it doesn't need to be needed. The other parts included from the other modules I've written are more directly connected to the setting itself or the city needed. We aren't using a city. We're going to just be using a war zone. Like drop them in middle of the war front. That's where it would take place. So we don't need cities and anything like that. Just the nations. All right. So we have our synopsis, the large scope. We have our background, brief history, the 3 blurbs. We have our adventure hook. We have the for the DM section. Anything else I am missing? So I don't always include this, but I think it's worthwhile for this adventure. I'm going to include a section about 3. The concept. It's heading 3, this one is heading 2. Okay. A little different. How's everyone doing? Again, if you guys have questions about my ramblings, please ask. Always go over. So, concept of the adventure. This explains where I got the idea from, kind of behind the scenes. I did this for my original adventure, Prospects of the Forgotten One, which was my like for the idea behind necromancy not always being evil. And I kind of go into a blurb about why or where that comes from. For this adventure, the concept, we've already written some of it up here. So I'm going to go back, go pull it out basically. So why do I want to do this? What do I want to do with this? This one right here. This is it. This is my concept in a nutshell, basically. This adventure is to create a stronger connection between players and their characters, as well as the character and the setting. Because again, this isn't an adventure. Technically, it's a session 0. It is before your first session. So it's the setup to some of the lore these characters are going to have. So from there, let's see. Just going to explain that basically, or why I decided to do this. Again, playing with wording in my head. There we go. So this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is what where the adventure came from, the concept for it, why I'm doing it, and why I'm streaming it. Because I want to share that experience with others. I enjoy the creative aspect of this game, of this hobby, so why not share it? So, we're going for about 90 minutes now. So let's look up everything here that we've done so far, from the concept to, or everything in the briefing. So you can see here all this stuff here. This is going to be one page in our layout. And now we can start going into the next page. This is where our act starts. Typically what I do is in my layouts, before I get into Act 1 and Act 2, I always give all the information that the DM needs to look through first. So after the briefing is going to be, typically in my modules, is the city. Well, like I mentioned, there isn't a city in this adventure. So what we're going to go over instead is the encampments, the Echelon encampment and the uh, Loith encampment. Encampment, can't talk. So let's go over that. And what is inside each of these camps that maybe, if there's a reason to jump into these downtime things. But again, session 0 shouldn't need a lot of it. So instead of my normally 2 to 3 pages, maybe it's only going to be 1. I'm going to go up here, get title 1, sorry, heading 1. And the Warfront. Again, these titles will typically change once or twice at least. And underneath here, I usually have some kind of picture. We're going to go into the text. We will do design and all that extra stuff. We'll do that once the writing is finished. You should always work through the writing, get it done, get it finished, because while you're setting, for example, I'm not, as you can probably tell, I'm not the strongest writer, which means I need an editor to look at my stuff. So I do all the writing, I send it to an editor friend of mine. While they're editing, I start looking at layout or pictures and style. It's been a long process, but for the last um, most of my, or all of my adventures up till this point have used DMs or GM Binder, and it's a great resource for somebody who's starting out. It helps format everything and make it look super nice. It's more of a CSS or HTML style designer. Um, but I've wanted to teach myself proper things for layout and design and things like that. So um, the last project that I've done, the For Whom a Bell Tolls is actually my last project, last adventure that will be on GM Binder. I've got several other projects in mind, but I'm going to be doing them myself, hopefully, as much as possible, myself in things like Photoshop and InDesign. So teaching myself is slow. But I'm going to go through that process with you. But first, we need to get through the writing as much of it as possible so we can send it to our editor before going to the design. First steps first, second step second. Obvious, but it works. So I'm just dropping in some basic things, basic template from my other adventures, and then we'll go on. So these are the basic headings that I've got. There's two. Yeah. Now that I've done 3 or 4 adventures and I've done some layout stuff and helped other people on theirs, um, I can kind of see the template that I have, and the template I have works for how I do things. You might find your own template, but after a while, there should be some kind of pattern that you see that you can replicate in all of your projects. So that's what I'm doing here. So brief history, people of interest, places of interest, and then goes into the city, which we don't need. And then goes into, yeah, so we're going to have maybe 1 page of, oh, because this will be, yeah, so 1 page is going to be, it'll work out pretty nicely. 1 page is going to the war fronts. This one we will change. 1 page is going to be for humanity, or the realm of man, or mundane realm, we'll call it, because that's what I want to keep. 1 page for them. And because we are creating characters and creatures and the players will play those creatures, we are also going to have the realm, or the fiendish realm. So inside the fiendish realm, we'll also have a brief history. Do it this way. Now, as I mentioned, I have talked about, or I've gone over my pantheon, but what I haven't done is gone over any of my demons. I've got my, uh, in my setting, pantheons work a little bit differently, but there's still a fiendish realm. I haven't gone over any of the hierarchy for the fiends, so that might be something that we need to flesh out before I can include in this section, which I'll do on my own time between streams. So we are going to have people of interest and places of interest. How we do the time? Yeah, another 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so, probably. Now again, the mundane realm fighting together, two nations. So maybe this part I split into the two nations. I'm going to do that, but this might be something I choose against later on. Neighbors playing loud music. Hope you don't pick that up. Let's say echelon. And so what has echelon been doing? Let's see. No. Forces instead. What is something else that they've been doing? And this is going to be typical military stuff because it's a military war. So think of your hierarchies. What are they doing? What have they been doing up until now when the adventure starts? Give your DMs some kind of information where they know, because one of the players are going to ask something along the lines of, well, we've been here for a week. Well, I should know some things. Who do I talk to? Where do they stay? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to give some of that information so the DM can be comfortable enough to make it up or be comfortable enough to just run it the way that we have it. Provide both of those sides of it because you never know what players are going to throw at your DMs. Scales to determine size and location of beans. And so in my setting, Echelon, they're the kingdom that has, or the side of my setting that has the gnomes who tinker and create things and come up with all these different strange technologies. The Loith Empire are more traditional. They stick to what they know. They focus on one thing and learn that. But because there's a truce, they're going to be forging their power, combining their strength, hopefully to fight off the demons. So Echelon Kingdom has designated some of the artisans to teach it to them. Now, what is the Loith Empire doing? So since joining, part of their traditional values is trying horses. Part of their traditional values is their, I don't want to say craftsmanship, that's not the right word, their combat knowledge. They are the better hand-to-hand fighters. They are more refined in the way that they carry swords and things. Like I mentioned, Loith are basically they are the people who are inspired by all of the Asian cultures that I am part of or been into, as well as fantasy Asia, so samurais and things like that. That will bleed into some of this. They're the ones who train. Let's see, what are the generals doing? All right, last one. Get one more. Um, I know what I want for this. I just need to think about how I'm going to say it. So they are the ones who are going to be calming down some of the scary ones, motivating. There we go. I don't know who is doing it yet. Motivating any member of, let's say, motivating soldiers. There we go. No. And soldiers, fighters. All right. I think we'll finish the mundane realm stuff today, and that'll be the end of the stream. Fiendish realm, we'll talk about creating the creatures and how I go about doing that. Sharing some resources maybe about that. So let's finish up people of interest, places of interest, give it some quick information, and we'll call it a day. All right, places of interest are easy to do first. So we need the one. They always get numbered in my modules. You'll notice I capitalize things. I'm surprised I haven't done it a lot here, but I capitalize things a lot that don't really need to be capitalized, so you might see me go back and change them from time to time. Sometimes I don't even notice I've done it. Let's see. Life. And then we are going to have motion. Probably keep all of them together. Let's see. Can't think of how I'm going to say it now, so I'm just going to continue on. Don't want to call it court, but it's kind of where my head's going right now, and I'm just going to leave it, change it later. That's all. I can go back. Not general, but the higher ups, and I don't mean general as in everyone. Let's use a different word for general. On echelon camp. North camp. That way we could do. I'm going to call it officer quarters. I knew I'd get there eventually, and this is typically what happens. So I'd rewrite. And this is going to be plenty. You have 6 locations in the camp. Again, shouldn't need to spend a lot of time in the camp compared to the other modules that I write. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail that I typically do. I might do 3 or 4 people, and I don't know if I'm going to name them today, but I've got some archetype, tropes type characters I want, some NPCs that'll be interesting, and then that'll be it. Yeah. So, people of interest. I need, again, don't know if I'll keep this, but don't know if he'll be on in the front. Same with Lord Takeda. So I don't know if I'm going to keep them, so I'm going to put a question mark. What do they call it? Quartermaster. The ambassadors for both echelon and life. So maybe 5 and 6, 4 and 5. Then we've got And that should be enough for me to go into next time. I'll work out some details of names and descriptions and things later. We'll finish that up next time, and then we'll go into the Phoenix realm. Yeah. So I do believe that is going to be everything that I go over today. If you want, realizing that I don't have my audio set up for the title card. If you want, keep up on my Twitter and on my Instagram about when I'm going to post. I will always try to keep up to date when I'm going. Again, I don't know when the next time I'm going to do this is. Um, it's just when I have time, given current situations. I have a lot of time, so maybe tomorrow. I don't know. I'm also testing out a couple different things, different times of days. We'll see what happens. Uh, but if you've got any questions, leave a comment down below. I'll make sure to look at that. If you want to follow me, my social media is there. Thank you, and see you next time.